A bit of a warning here. I am part Swedish, but I've got a kind of a strange background. I don't know how many citizenships people have here. I've got 3. But no, I'm born in Sweden, left Sweden when I was 15. So this is kind of a backwards looking perspective, right, on Sweden. I started a company 7 years ago doing chip semiconductor, and in 2012 we went into this open source hardware domain, as James mentioned. And what you see there is a open source board, kind of like a Raspberry Pi for parallel computing, that we started in 2012. And we've now shipped to 75 countries, 200 universities, 20,000 of these computers built in total, completely open source. You know, I am an inventor. I don't know if I'm a good one, but I would definitely call myself an inventor. And so in preparing for this talk, I kind of looked at myself and the kind of person I am. At least I'll give you one data point from a Swedish expat, and maybe draw some parallels. I would add a disclaimer that I absolutely hate stereotypes, it's I think it's primitive. But so anything I say here, take with a grain of salt. Anything that you can say, any property you can attach to a person, is a kind of multi-variable Gaussian distribution. So everything is data. But so I had to go and research some of the stuff. But I know there are a lot of great Swedish inventions, and I think I really like them from their simplicity and their power. And their cause, right? So these are not trivial inventions, they're important ones. You take the 3-point seatbelt, for example, complete lifesaver. The adjustable wrench, adjustable span, thermometer, Celsius, right? Before that, what do we have? Fahrenheit, and we still have today. And I live in the US now. I refuse to use a Fahrenheit scale because frankly, it's stupid. I have an American wife, and she says, "What are you doing? I don't understand the Celsius. How can you understand Fahrenheit? It doesn't make any sense. 0 is the drying lowest temperature or something, and 100 is the temperature of the body, but it's not 198.6, so it doesn't make any sense." Dynamite, great invention by Alfred Nobel. Before that you had nitroglycerin, very, very dangerous. The pacemaker, this I looked up in Wikipedia. So the pacemaker, great story, 1958, first implantable pacemaker was done in Karolinska in Stockholm. The guy who they implanted to then had many more operations. But the first guy who had the device implanted outlived both the surgeon and the inventor of the pacemaker. Died at 86 in 2001. Amazing story. The zipper, the safety match, before the safety match, things would just burn down because they hadn't separated the 2 reactive components. So those are some of the famous Swedish inventions, and I think that the threat here is that there is a safety part of this, and important cause of the invention. I think they're beautifully simple. To me, these are things to emulate. And I want to compare this to the modern invention, in modern US invention, this, right? Here, Apple has patented what I think boils down to a square box with slightly rounded corners. What are some of the properties of an inventor, the way I see it? You have to be curious. And that's a universal trait. Everybody, every nation is curious, so that's not something, prototypically Swedish. I do think you have to be stubborn, especially as a sole inventor. You have to, and stubborn, let's say persistent or stubborn, I don't know, I think you have to be stubborn because you have to, and the way I differentiate it is, persistent means to not giving up too early. Stubborn means going beyond that. When the data says this shouldn't work, and you keep doing it. And some of these things, you really have to work on it for a long time and iterate to get it to be done. An introvert, right? I'm quite the introvert, and I like working alone. For the lone inventor, that's a property that's probably part of the cycle. And then finally, acting, right? You get things done by acting rather than talking. So there's so I tried to translate roughly to Swedish. That's not translated to acting. That was made, I think, by the Swedish ski team in the 70s. The idea here is just go, right? It's not complicated. Just do it. So that, and I think from a kind of traditional Swedish psyche, it fits quite well. The inventor that works in solitude feels quite comfortable with that, and it extends beyond that, right? So I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Sweden, and if you think of the kind of the famous Swedish sportsmen, Borg, Denmark, and Rosberg, which many probably haven't heard of, but he's awesome. They didn't talk much. They kind of did their talking on the field, and with incredible results. To me, growing up, these were guys to emulate. These were the silent heroes that worked very hard, very humble. What I haven't heard yet at the conference was how much hardware is a part of Swedish business. It's certainly there's plenty of great software companies in Sweden, and especially in modern days. But as big business goes, Sweden is all about hardware. So I think something like 17 of the 20 biggest companies in Sweden are based on hardware or manufacturing something. So there's a history there, where from IKEA that builds cheap furniture that you have to put together yourself, to Ericsson, who's the world's leading base station manufacturer, also an investor in my company, and Volvo, Saab, and so forth. There's great engineering on the hardware side in Sweden. So a lot of legacy there. One thing that I don't know if this is true or not, because I don't know the people, the founders of the companies and the people who eventually made these unicorns. But to me, at least, starting a company, psychologically, this was definitely consideration. There's a great thing about having a safety net that you have in Sweden that you don't have in the U.S. In the U.S., you start a company, and if you're 20, you might, if things don't work out, no big deal. You go get a job somewhere. But as you go along in the U.S., you have a very palpable fear that if you do lose your job or if you go out of business, you're pretty much screwed. You have your abilities and so forth as an engineer and computer programming. You probably have some safety there because your education, your demand. But there's a real fear there in not having healthcare. Healthcare in the U.S. Costs $25,000 a year just for the premiums. If you don't have somebody like an IBM paying for it, but if you're in a small business, you have to pay $25,000 a year in healthcare for a family, and that's before you even have any additional expenses. But to me, exiting as a company or doing anything, I think that the fact that and I think that the socialism comes in here as well. The upside is not that important, so you just kind of keep doing it, and all of a sudden you're a billion-dollar company. Whereas in the U.S., having $1 million or $10 million is a life-changing event. So if I'm in the U.S., I might say, you know what, I'm going to exit for 20 million because that's going to change my life. In a Swedish company, yeah, it's going to change your life, but your life is already pretty good. You got a safety net. What is there to worry about? So, my view is that doesn't make sense to exit too early. And what I've found from US companies and certainly Israeli companies is, as a founder, you want to exit early. You cannot afford to go for broke. And so by selling early, you're not going to make a unicorn. So having lived so this is a split about how I've spent my life, 41 years, 15 years in Sweden, 8 in Israel, and the rest in the US. And I think in terms of diversity that James mentioned, I learned some good things from all 3 countries. So in Sweden, the best qualities that I feel like I learned was my enjoyment and solitude. And that's certainly been good for my invention process. I embrace the stubbornness, not giving up early. I've been doing this startup for 7 years now, and I think probably many people would have given up by now. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Usually stubbornness, you praise it after somebody succeeds. But if they drive it into the grave, then that was obviously a stupid thing to do. But stubbornness, I think, is generally a good thing. Confidence, kind of a typical, stereotypical American quality that I think is a very good thing, and I'll talk about it in terms of the startup. And then optimism. Right? In Hebrew, there's a saying, which means it's going to be okay. So this kind of optimism you have to have as a startup. So the taking background in 3 countries is an interesting perspective. Working in solitude, to me at least, this is comparing myself to the rest of my family, which is now more American than I am. My wife, they're always talking, right, all the time, and I like quiet. I really like quiet. And so I like to hide away somewhere in my attic or in my office somewhere and not hear anybody. And this is how I think. And even sitting in meetings sometimes, and I'm just like, just shut up. You're blocking, you're jamming my thought process here. I want quiet. So, and I think there are other inventors, like for example, Cray, famous computer designer from the US. He was famous for his love for solitude and quiet. He would basically, during the day, he kind of float around the office, help some people out, and then when everybody left, that's when he would start his real work. So basically at night. So I think that this, the working in solitude is a characteristic that works very well for founders, inventors, maybe software developers that need to see something. Eventually, you have to start working with people and talking to them. I learned that too, but in the beginning, this is a very important thing, and it can, if you don't have that capability, it can break you. For example, I had somebody working remotely for us that actually broke down because he was used to being social and working in a company, and he said, "I can't sit here. I'm going crazy. I'm going, I'm getting cabin fever from working remotely." So, so this is a powerful thing, but not an easy one. The confidence part in my business, basically we're going up against Intel. Intel is a $50 billion Godzilla of the chip industry. We're a 5-person startup, and we're going not trying to go head to head, but because our potential customers are always comparing us to Intel, I guess we are going head to head. But we're trying to stay away from them, but it's hard to. And so that's pretty crazy, right? So who in the right mind would go up against such a giant? And I think that is a pretty American thing. And where I've kind of combined my optimism and stubbornness, even to the point of not being rational. So this is a Kickstarter campaign that we ran 2 years ago. This was the open source board, the parallel board that we did. We ended up raising almost $1 million in 30 days, but we had to design a chip on that budget. So it was a crazy low budget, but it was still $1 million. It's hard to raise from anybody. And so this is the projection over 30 days, what the funding process looked like. We set a minimum goal of $750,000. And usually the way Kickstarter projects work is, you make it the first couple of days or you don't make it at all. So after the first couple of days, we weren't going to make it. But we kept plugging away, right? Changing our view, putting up more content and things like that. And stay, it was not for even a day did it enter my mind that we weren't going to make it. Now listen, if you see this projection, right, all your extrapolated data is telling you you're not going to make it, and yet you don't give up and you say you are going to make it. That's a kind of a blind optimism and stubbornness that, at least in this case, paid off. So in the last day, I think we raised $400,000 in 2 days. So it went vertical. So that was a combination of two traits, right? That I think I got from two countries. Although optimism could be done in Sweden as well, but I know my optimism came from my third experience. And finally, this is another scary slide from my startup now, 7 years. This looks at my cash over 7 years. And I don't know, we're here to run a company and has raised money. All right, so I hope your cash flow doesn't look like this. This is a freaking nightmare. So this is, basically it's, now imagine 7 years, right, with this crap. So this is the first year. At the beginning, you see kind of like a lean startup, one-person show. You're burning very little. It's kind of comfortable. If it wasn't going to work out, I was going to get a job. Then I get a seed. I still burn very little for the second year. The first year was all my own money, so this is my retirement funding that I spent, and so now I'm not going to retire. But unless I go live in Sweden. This was my, and by the way, this was always my fallback plan. This is why it's good to have 3 citizenship. So in the US right now, I have 4 kids. It costs $50,000 a year per kid to go to college. So times 4, so 16 times 50. You're talking about $1 million to send my kids to college. I don't have that. So I told my kids, look, if you want to go to college, you better learn some Swedish quick. At least unless something good comes out of the company. But so the second year we got some seed money, and or I got some seed money, and it burned down. Then we got this. Nobody was going to invest in a chip company because it's not a good investment for venture capitalists. So we found a strategic investor that was willing to do a payment plan. So basically they put in $1.5 million, but they only did it based on kind of milestones and $250,000 a quarter. So basically, every quarter it would be like, all right, are they going to pay us, right? So we had this little seesaw for about a year and a half. 250 in, 250 back, 250 in, 250 back. And then we eventually, we got a little bit of money raised right here. The upper one. So now we raised like $900,000 in a convertible note from some angels. Of course, then we made the bad mistake of increasing our burn rate, so it went down. We did the Kickstarter, it went up, and then we spent money we didn't have. So we got partners to fund things, give us stuff for free, racked up. To this day, it was the biggest mistake I ever made, and I will never make that again. But basically, we got in debt, right? So we're down there, we're owing over $1 million in debt to people, and just I'm communicating with them and telling them, look, it's going to be okay, just wait, right? Don't sue us yet and drive us into bankruptcy. And then Ericsson and another investor came in and put in a fair amount of money. Now we're in the plus again. Second mistake, which is be too optimistic. So optimistic can go both ways. So we said we sold 10,000 of these parallel boards. We're going to become the next Raspberry Pi. We're way better than Raspberry Pi, so if they sold 4 million, we'll sell a lot. So we built up a lot of inventory thinking that we were going to sell out, and then we didn't. So now we're sitting on like $1 million worth of boards, which is painful. So then you're sitting on boards, but not capital. But we're recovering, and now we're starting this kind of seesaw again, and we're at the end of that curve, and we'll see where we go. But this is pure stubbornness in playing video. So, and I think, this is my experience from Sweden, right? So I would say my view of the world, or my experience from Sweden, Israel, and the US is diversity is strength, and you know, this is something I truly believe, and I couldn't have done this without the experiences from those three places. And you know, don't assume anything that you know that goes for people, but for engineering as well. The engineers I work with, if there's one pet peeve I have that drives me up the wall, is assumptions people make. I mean, they kill projects and they kill companies. So if you're going to assume something, this has to be a mathematically proven thing that you base everything on. And again, it goes by people. And I would say that if you're going to emulate things, emulate practices, not people. Everything is a Gaussian, so it's really impossible to emulate a Swede because there is no Swede. Same thing about Americans. There is no American. But there are certain traits that I think are very good to remember. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Next